Thank you very much, Sean. And first of all, I just want to start off by thanking the organizers of this conference for having the Grain Commission come and speak to you today. One of the things that we've been doing a lot at the Grain Commission has been looking at grades, and I know it's a big issue for you guys. And as Sean mentioned, I did farm for a number of years. I always thought grades a lot of times when I was farming was a way of taking money out of my pocket. But when I actually understood it a little bit better, it's really a way of setting a benchmark so you are ensured that you're going to get paid for what you actually deliver. I've got a couple of topics, so the science behind grade grading, and I did want to touch very quickly on the wheat class review because I know it's going to impact virtually everyone in this room as well. So I'm going to speed through some of this stuff, and again, if you ever have any questions, you know how to get a hold of me at any time, please do so. So in regard to the science behind grade grading, it does preserve the quality of individual parcel of grain. And as you know, as you're farming, certain years you get a bit of frost and it might go through parts of your quarter, maybe not through the whole thing. And so as you're delivering to the elevator, that really looks at the actual lot of grain that you're delivering at that point in time. It also creates a set standard for quality for the industry and for you as producers as well. So there's an understanding between yourselves, and there's also an understanding for the industry of what that grain grade means. And the grain grades create a balance between those expectations that the customer has, because he has a certain expectation, just as you as a customer of whether it's fertilizer or chemical or fuel or whatever it is you're buying, you have an expectation of how it's working, and you as a producer also then has an expectation of what you're going to receive in return for what you've just delivered. If the grading classification system is to be meaningful, then it's going to have a scientific basis. And it's one thing to actually look at it and do an assessment, but what is that assessment based on? So we're using science to look at the functionality of that grain based on those degrading factors. So we continually investigate and document the effects of those end-use quality and grading factors at various levels and degrees of severity. So you look at a slight severity of frost, for example, will have a significantly different severity at a higher degree of frost. And I've got some pictures later on to kind of show you the examples. We also must make sure that are ensured that our tolerances are realistic and late to end-use impact. And again, this is something that you want to make sure when you're buying a specific product, how it impacts you, just as the customer that's buying the Canadian grain wants to have that same understanding. And we regularly test to ensure the relevance, and the grade grading standards are reviewed and just as scientific research and industry practices dictate. Now, that's very important because the industry practices do change over time. And one of the things that I'll talk about a little bit later is a mildew study that we're currently doing. Some of the changes that they've actually done in the industry, that we're seeing that the mildew may not be as big an issue as it has been in the past. It may allow us to actually relax the mildew standards a little bit, which would allow you guys to deliver grain with just a slight bit more mildew and not have an impact. When we think about grading, though, it really is a visual system. You're not happy when you sit in a lineup right now. Think about it if every load had to be tested scientifically. So we do it on a visual system. We look at the indicators of quality. And so when either the Grain Commission inspector or the inspector that's unloading your truck at the elevator, he's looking at for those indicators of quality, which in effect he's kind of looking at some of the degrading factors as well. And the other thing he's looking for is indicators of safety. So for quality, for example, he might be in a wheat, he might be looking for HVK or hard vitreous kernels to kind of give that indication of the quality of that wheat. For indicators of safety, he might be looking for things like ergot in that wheat, because those are safety issues. So those are really some of the visual things, and how you set the grades really relate to how they're seen visually. Now, it is subjective. We'd love to get to less subjective measures, but at this point in time, we use subjective grading. There are three things that really, and when we look at multiple grading factors, are really the three things that we have to account for: safety, end-use functionality, and marketability. Those are the three things that the grading system looks at and adjusts to. So when you look at canola, yes, it's distinctly green in canola, and yes, it's not a health issue. What it does is it's just the chlorophyll. As everyone knows, it's the additional chlorophyll in the canola. The impact is certainly not on taste, but the impact is visual. A customer doesn't want to be frying their prawns in green oil And so it's a visual thing for them. But the other side of it is it has an impact because the more green, the more chlorophyll in it, the faster that oil is going to go rancid in the bottle. So for the customer buying your Canadian canola, he needs to make sure that the chlorophyll content is low enough that he can put it in a bottle. It has a good shelf life. So those are some of the things that we look at when we're talking about these the amount of chlorophyll content or the amount of green allowed in a sample of canola. Now I was going to specifically because there's been a lot of issues not only this year but in the past years across the country related to heat. So I did throw a couple slides in here on dockage, and I'll tell you why. About 3 or 4 years ago, we had some very hot weather in Manitoba. I was up at the grading tables, and the guys were separating some canola samples out, and they had a kind of a pile pushed to the side, and I said, wow, look at all the dockage. And they said, no, that's not dockage, that's sound seed. And I go, if I hauled that load of grain into the elevator I used to deliver to, that'd be dockage. So it really takes, when you look at it, the seeds were wrinkled, they were sharp, they looked like dockage. And I farmed for quite a few years, as Sean just mentioned. It's one of the things that you have to understand. If you open it up and there's some meat inside, it's still considered a sound seed. So a couple of things we do in determination of dockage. Normally it's just the assess there's 2 stages you can assess it at. So it's just do your normal cleaning procedures. Now if you have some inseparable seeds in there, they do allow, the Grain Act does allow the company, if you choose, to clean that for grade improvement. But the maximum you can lose out of good clean seed is 5% to try and increase the grade improvement. So if you're going to try to go from number 3 to a number 1, you know what the price difference is between a 3 and a 1. And if you lose 5%, does that make sense to you? Does that make sense for the company? So that's something you need to think about. We do also allow the use for multiple screens. And I think that's something that I think is not well known. And a lot of people say to me, well, why don't you just have one set of screens? And it's really because canola, as everyone knows, is really impacted by environmental conditions. Some years you're going to get bigger seed, some years smaller seed. So we actually have allowed the uses of multiple screens. But the goal really is to move the weed seeds and the roughage to minimize the loss of the whole or the sound seed. And again, the sound seed is that it couldn't be those ones that are really wrinkled up and ugly looking, but actually to create the best grade possible as well. So these are the sieves that we allow elevator companies to use. And I've highlighted the 2 in the round holes in red and the 2 slotted in red as well. Those are the ones our inspectors use virtually all the time. So they're using almost the largest round holes and the smallest slotted sieves. So something that you guys need to be aware of when you're hauling into an elevator, that they have an ability to use these, but you need to see what the dockage is. Now the issue around in years of heat stress and you've got small canola seed, one of the things we hope you've used the harvest sample program, because that'll give you a good indication of the actual sound seed you've got in it. Now if you haven't used that, there's a couple other ways to do it. You can submit a sample to us and it will be at a cost or a fee, and we'll give you a dockage assessment on that. The other way is if you're hauling it to an elevator, and now that you know that small seed sometimes, and if you break it open, you see got some yellow meat in there, then you can say, you know what, I don't think that's all dockage. Why don't we just send a sample to the Grain Commission and just see how close you are to it. You don't want to be confrontational with the manager, and I know there's a lot of concern about that. And I used to actually do it with my manager. You do it in a manner that you just ask them to say, I think I think I'm right, and you think you're right. Let's get the Grain Commission to assess it. So it's something I think you guys should watch for, especially this year in high heat areas, and a lot of Alberta certainly suffered that. So onto other grading factors, Ascochyta and lentils. It is a fungal disease. It's not something that has a health issue, but what it does is causes processing problems. So where that fungal disease is on the outside, when you split and take the coat off, you lose a little bit of meat, and so it creates a low volume for the processor. So again, that's one of the grading factors. So it's no different than you buying something. You want to get the full value for what you've just bought. Ergot is a fungal parasite. It is toxic if ingested. The alkaloid is the same as LSD, so it can be very toxic. One thing it is very stable as well. So it survives the processing and baking. So this is a sample that we did at the lab, and it's one of the scientists, and unfortunately I couldn't speak to him because he's already left the Grain Commission. But he did take a sample of wheat with ergot in it, ground the whole thing, put it in, baked. He looked at the flour, it was 470 parts per billion. He went through the baking process and ended up at 255 parts per billion on the crust. So it's very stable. It didn't even reduce it by 50%. So it's something that's why we have to have set tolerances for ergot. There are certain safety factors. The other one is aesthetics. Everyone knows what you see when you see a black spot in a noodle or a black spot in a piece of bread or something. Everyone is questioning, what is that, right? Fusarium head blight. This one is quite interesting. The Fusarium it's a fungal infection as well. When it first started in Atlantic Canada and Ontario, the chemotype or the strain was A15 Dawn. Since it's moved basically west from Manitoba and into through Saskatchewan into Alberta, the chemotype has changed. It's now A3. It is certainly more virulent, and so it's something that we have to watch for in the Grain Commission as far as how much of the chemotypes have changed, how much of what's the virulency of it, and then what do we need to set the standard at. The other side of Fusarium is it actually works against the kernel in regard to processing as well. So it destroys the starch granules, protein, and the cell walls as well. So it makes it for reduced milling performance, so you have less flour yield out of it, and it'll create weak dough properties as well. So it's not a good thing for manufacturers when they're getting this, and the dough properties start to change within the processing of their wheat. Mitch damage, larvae feed on the starch or the sugars. One of the things that this can do is once the crop is harvested, it can actually give you a false protein. It'll give you a higher than normal protein, but you're going to see it's going to have poor milling performance. It'll have a high ash content, and the ash content actually has an impact. And I have some slides later to show you. It makes the flour gray, and it makes it not very appealing. It has an impact on the functional gluten properties as well, and it also makes that dough sticky and weak. And there's some plants. I was just at a plant in England. They put out 8,000 to 9,000 loaves an hour. There's some plants in Malaysia. They're putting out 80,000 to 90,000 loaves an hour. So there's a number of streams online at the same time. So if you start to change the properties, if you're starting to get some of this wheat that's coming in, the flour that's coming in, and you're starting to get these problems, it becomes a huge issue for these companies to deal with. This is a shot of severe midge damage in amber durum. What you're going to do when you mill that, you're going to end up with a darker semolina color, high ash content, and bran specks. And again, you're going to find that pasta with spots and a gritty texture. As a customer or consumer, you don't want to buy that. And so that's why we've set in certain grading standards as well. Heat and frost stress, again, something I found very interesting coming to the Grain Commission. Our inspectors can't tell the difference between heat and frost stress. The kernel looks exactly the same, but it is one of the most serious degrading factors. What it does, whether it impacts the kernel at the start through the heat stress or at the end for the frost, it doesn't allow the high molecular weight proteins to be inputted into the kernel at that late stage. What it'll then do is also make the kernel harder to mill, so you have a lot more starch damage. That means you don't have the water absorption, which means then you have some problems in your baking processes. And your ash content increases with severity. And this is just a kind of a visual. Now these are samples, and I do apologize for the color. I wish that it was a lot whiter. You could certainly see it a lot better. But these are samples out of our harvest sample program, and these samples of wheat were degraded for only one factor, for frost. So when we look at our grading, the grade looked at the samples that had wheat that were graded number 3 because of frost, baked the loaf of bread out of that. Number 4, good feed, severe frost, and extremely frosted. And you can see, the loaf volume starts to go down. You can see that the color starts to change, and the functionality of the gluten strength starts to change in the last couple loaves as well. Now, you can make bread out of extremely frosted wheat, but like you, I'm probably not going to want to eat too much of that. Sprout damage. One of the reasons we have sprout damage is when the kernel sprouts, it actually activates an enzyme called alpha amylase, which degrades the starch. This enzyme, because you can't tell how much of it is per sprouted kernel. It can be a small amount in it, it could be a very large amount, but the enzyme is actually very potent. And so that's when you end up using the Hagberg falling number test quite a bit. But the bread will become very cosmetically I guess, dark in nature because you've created extra sugars. The bread becomes very sticky and crumbly in consistency, and it really has an impact again for that end user. Now, this is a slide from a Japanese company. This is how they score some of their bread. So they bake the loaf of bread. It must fit within that black square. Because the reason they're doing that is because for this company, one of the products they produce, they slice the crust off, and then they need to package it without crust, nice square loaf without crust. You can see the cell structure is actually very nice, and make sure that, and you can see the sides of the bread are very strength, has a lot of strength through it, which really looks at some of the gluten strength and some of those other issues. This is the same square. With a different with wheat with a number of a fair bit of sprout damage in it. You certainly see the holes, the gas. When we're making it a bread, you're going to get a lot more gas bubbles because of the sugars. The crust is very weak, and the dough becomes very sticky. And this is just a shot of what happens when you try and put it through an automatic slicer. So that the sound on the left is very good, and then severely sprouted on the right. You're going to have guys pulling their hair out if that's going through an automatic bread slicer in a factory condition when you're putting 80 to 90,000 loaves an hour out through it. So it's a big impact, and one of the reasons why we have to set the standards where we are with them. Heat damage is something we don't see very often. This is artificial heat damage. So when you're drying your wheat, I know it's certainly there's a tendency to bump the heat up a little bit and get it through fast. But if it is a good quality wheat, you do need to be careful in that regard because it is sensitive to heat damage. It reduces the gluten functionality and reduces the dough properties and ultimately the end product. And here's another visual. The loaf on the left has no damage, so it has nice high volume to it. The loaf in the middle is a 50-50 blend of good wheat or good flour and heat damaged flour, and the loaf on the end again is the heat damaged. So you can see the loaf volume continues to increase, the functionality. You'll see the shape starts to change, which is really the functionality of the gluten that's within that wheat. Mildew, as I talked about earlier, it is a non-toxic fungal infection, so it's not going to hurt you to eat it, but it does darken the flour in the semolina color, which is not appealing to manufacturers. It's just basically aesthetically unappealing. We are, as I mentioned, in year 2 of a study on mildew to see if there are impacts, if we can actually, what we can do with our standards, if we can actually relax them a little bit or not. And again, this really kind of relates to some of the changes that some of the industry has made in the processing of wheat as well. So we always have to be cognizant of what they're doing. We have to continue to watch, and as I say, no grading factor is immune to review. It's always up for review because as things change, as industry practices change, as you as farmers change, as varieties change, things change. So we need to be continually monitoring that. HVK in amber durum. This one is really just showing that the bottom right-hand corner, that is the only kernel that will be considered non-vitreous. It's very important for customers when they're buying durum wheat, when they need a certain mill stream, certain sizes of semolina. If you look at the number 6 or the bottom right-hand corner, you'll see quite a white starch spot. When you mill that turns into very, very fine flour. It's something they can't use. It's actually what they do is they sift it through and they sift it out and it goes into dog food or some other product that is virtually worthless. So it is a high cost to them and a very low return when they have to move it out of their processes. Very quickly, I hope I still have time. The wheat class review. One just touch very briefly because this is going to impact you guys here in the room today. This is where we are today. You'll notice across the top the different classes, and in the pink you're seeing the Canadian Western Feed, Canadian Western General Purpose, and the Canadian Western Interim Wheat class. Those will be removed August 1st, 2016. What will happen is we will implement, and again, in the green is all staying the same, so all those classes, all those grades, everything's staying the same. What we will do is we'll implement a new Canadian Northern Hard Red class, which was what will be the interim wheat class will go into there, and the 29 varieties that we've identified will be moving out of the CWRS class and the CPS Red class. So they're going to go into the Canadian Northern Hard Red class. And the Canadian Western Special Purpose will also be created, and into that will go the Canadian Western Feed and the Canadian General Purpose. Now, the Canadian Special Purpose class will not, when varieties are being registered into that class, will not require a quality assessment. It will still require the agronomics and the disease assessment to ensure that they are not going to cause a problem to farmers. But those are where, and we're going to be moving to that very shortly, or I'm sorry, in August 1st of 2016. Now, I'll mention it right away. It's not, I mean, this is our direction at this point. The names may not be stuck yet. I know there's some concern about calling one the Canadian Northern Hard Red class. The intent is not to take away from the CWRS. That is our premium class, known around the world by customers of Canadian Grain. But we're looking for a name that kind of fits some of these other varieties that still have good properties, but not to the highest quality of CWRS class. If you look at where we are right now as a visual, the big blue box is really American wheats. So if you've got gluten strength on your left-hand axis and protein content on your bottom axis, all of the American wheats fit into that big blue box. So you're going to have your DNSs, your RSs, your DSs, and all those fit within that blue box, and it's really more adjusted based on gluten strength for them. Currently, you'll see where we are with the Harvest Lily and Unity at the very bottom end of the CWRS class. The intent, or the proposal, is to leave Extra Strong where it's at this point in time. We're going to bring CWRS up, from the Harvest Lily and Unity area, and we're going to use Carberry as the check, the bottom check. So any varieties in the CWRS that do not have the gluten strength according to the extensograft testing, they will be moved out of that, and those are the varieties that you'll probably have seen a lot more of, and will be seeing a lot more of in the near future. We'll leave Glen as the top check. CPS Red, we're going to use 5700 PR as the bottom check, and then Glen again as a top check. Even though it's a CWRS, we don't have any higher than that in the CPS Red class at this particular time, simply because there hasn't been a lot of research and development done on CPS Red at this point in time. We're going to be implementing the new Canada Northern Hard Red class, and that will be implemented 2016, August 1st, 2016. Into that class will be Harvest Lily and Unity, and they will be coming in August 1st, 2018. Now, initially we'd gone out and said this is going to happen August 1st, 2017. Because of the election, because of a couple other things, we decided we're going to wait until August 1st, 2018, just to ensure that everyone had the opportunity to try out some different varieties, make sure that you are comfortable in moving forward. Fowler, Prosper, and Elgin, that was in the interim wheat class, will be moving in there as well. So, last slide, steps remaining. So we're going to proceed with the transition process for varieties August 1st, 2018. So the varieties you're growing right now, you're going to have that time to actually get some, try some new varieties out if you're growing a lot of harvest, which is very popular and was popular on my farm as well. You're going to be able to implement, we're going to implement the Canada Northern Hard Red class and the Canada Western Special Purpose class, and that's going to be effective August 1st, 2016. And including grading schedules, because we'll be making those grading schedules up currently. The general purpose class will be eliminated August 1st, and the varieties will be now transitioned to the special purpose class, where no quality parameters, as I mentioned, are going to be specified. The Canada feed class will be eliminated August 1st, 2016. Interim wheat class will also be eliminated August 1st, 2016. And we're still with the ongoing consultations and discussions with our value chain stakeholders, which is why I'm here today as well. And looking for your feedback in regard to, are there things that you would like to see yet before we finalize this? Like I said, we're kind of in the direction we're going to be going. We can make some small tweaks at this point in time, and so we'd be very interested if you have any thoughts on that. So with that, thank you very much. And I'm not sure if I have time for questions, Sean. Okay. So if anyone has any questions.
Can you tell me, is there any chance that we can maintain Lillian in the hard red class until there's another variety red or comes out, so we've got an alternative?
Yeah, no, well, it's going to move 2018, August 1st, 2018. So you're going to be able to grow it for a couple more years in the CWRS class. There's the owner of FP Genetics that has Harvest is bringing out a brand new variety that says they claim it's 7% higher yielding and 7% higher yielding and earlier maturing. So there are varieties coming, but as far as Lillian, I'm not sure what replacements are. But the intent of moving them is not it's not to impact you as a producer. The intent in moving them is to ensure that our customers are happy with our wheat. Gluten strength has been a huge issue. I just got back from a new crop mission to UK and Italy, and the customers in the United Kingdom told us if we didn't make these changes, if we weren't moving away, if we weren't going to be strengthening our CWRS class, they'll buy their wheat from Kazakhstan. They'll buy it from France. They don't get. What they love about Canadian wheat is the consistency, but the gluten strength issue they're not be able to tolerate any longer. They were used to use our wheat as a carrier, but if we're going to be the same as everyone else, they're going to buy it from a closer destination and basically go away from Canadian wheat. So it is. I totally understand. Like I said, because I was a farmer and I used to have varieties that I liked on my farm as well. So I hear you, and I know that there's sawfly resistance and other issues between these different varieties. I know that developers are working on, but I'm not sure if there's a good replacement for you at this point. But like I say, you've got a couple of years. I know it's not what you're hoping to hear, but ultimately for the good of the industry, this change does need to be made.
The buffet table downstairs in the cellar.
Yes. No, that's right. So,
Repeat the question.
yeah, okay. So falling number is not a grade standard. One of the things that customers will ask for is falling number. So what we'll do is we'll assess. So we'll assess it as a number 1, or we'll assess it as a number 2. We do assess sprout damage visually, which takes place of a falling number. So if you're going to deliver at this point, and we did work at the Grain Commission with a couple of manufacturers of new equipment to be able to have a driveway test for falling number. We worked. I think we're in the 3rd or 4th generation of a piece of equipment. We got to work very well in a lab. It was repeatable. It would do the job, but unfortunately, it is not for an elevator environment. It's not for a driveway environment. It is extremely sensitive equipment, and so what we're still doing is using a visual assessment, and then customers of Canadian Grain will a lot of times ask for the falling number as a spec. But if we were to set it as a grain grade, then you'd be sitting in the elevator for, how long at the elevator with every load of wheat to get a falling number. We had hoped to get to that point, something that would take 5 to 10 minutes. So that you would know per load what you're delivering, but we're just not there in the technology at this point in time. Yes.
Sorry, Jim, I think it was Bill C-48 that was going to change how U.S. wheat was handled in the Canadian system.
Right.
Which died in the order paper with the previous government. Has there been any indication from the new administration on reintroducing that and how we may handle U.S. wheat coming in Canada in the future?
Right. At this point in time, we actually have not met with the new Ag Minister. We're not sure of his direction on Bill C-48 or a new bill, because it won't be Bill C-48, but the same, similar, or a change to the Canada Grain Act, some bill to change Canada Grain Act. So we haven't actually had that opportunity to meet with him. The one thing that we've, when you think about it as a Canadian producer, if you're going to deliver grain across the border, which I'm sure some of you guys in this part of the world have, you realize that when you're delivering to an elevator, you are not getting a statutory grade in the United States. The only statutory grade in the United States is what FGIS will put on, and it will only be put on export vessels. So what you're getting when you deliver to an elevator in the United States, country elevators, you're getting a country grade. So you'll get a number 1 or whatever they want to call it, and then as you leave, you'll be, I'm not sure how many days later before they actually do the assessment, and then they'll put the discounts according to that. So now if you think about that, so you're not, as a Canadian producer, you don't get a statutory grade. You deliver, basically you're delivering on a spec. So as an American producer coming into Canada with wheat, he can either sell it for feed if he chooses to, or he can actually make an arrangement with the elevator as well, and he'll sell it on a spec. So it'll be the same, in the same sense. He'll be able to sell it, they'll be able to set the price, the specs, and if he can meet it, then he can sell it for whatever price that elevator in Canada is willing to pay him. So, having that ability, and one of the things with that bill, or that condition in that bill, was that it was only going to address varieties that were actually registered in Canada but grown in the United States. So currently, any variety grown in the United States, the American producer can come into Canada, negotiate whatever deal he wants with the grain company, and can get paid basis a spec and a price that they negotiate.
Jim, another question on falling number. In Ontario, on a grain contract, they do test at the elevator, not like on every load, but they do have quality parameters that apply to falling number, and there's discounts for that, is there not?
That's a very good question, Sean. I believe there are, because in Ontario, those it's a little bit different than Western Canada, because they're delivering to the term or the elevator, and then it's being used domestically for cookies or for other things. So I know there's some initial testing going on before they get it to the elevator as well, so that they know how to segregate it within their elevator system. But I'm not positive on the full, because the Grain Commission does not, in that sense, we don't do much in Eastern Canada. The Grain Act is really kind of a Western Canada based in a lot of ways. So.
Any more questions?
Oh.
Sorry.
Oh, sir.
When I go to the grocery stores and I see sprouted wheat bread at a huge price above normal bread, how do they do that? What's wrong with that picture when my sprouted wheat gets this amount?
Yeah, that's a good question. I'm certainly not a scientist, but when the sprouted wheat bread would be a different process than the Canadian short dough process, which your regular bread would be made with. I'm not sure how they sprout it and then kill the enzyme, the alpha amylase enzyme, because they actually have to kill that enzyme, because it'll just continue to work. But I can't. I'm sorry, I can't answer that question. I'm sure our scientists in the GRL can answer that question. And if you'd like that answer, I can certainly. If you can meet, I'll talk to you later, and I'll get that answer for you.
Sounds like a good story idea. Okay, thanks a lot. Really appreciate it.